The interesting thing about Myers is that in playing that game, if you know where to look in her background, she is very connected with a firm called GTAC, which is in a lot of trouble, has been cited for a lot of fraudulent activities down in Brazil. And they, of course, make lottery machines, which they use the same technology as voting machines. Inside, they're the same. And GTAC had contracts with the Lottery Commission in Texas, and that's a whole other, investigation in and of itself. Mm-hmm. But she was nothing more than a smokescreen.
Yeah, I always considered her to be like a deflection, kind of a distraction, to keep the eyes turned away from other things that were going on.
Right. Here's the problem, as I see it. Patrick Fitzgerald is case in point. We're at the point now, having not really nailed them good and well for these past serious transgressions, that they're in a position right now where they're calling the shots on what is terrorism, who is a terrorist, and what they can do about it, including the use of torture has been approved by this administration.
Right.
And the term terrorism has never been adequately defined, so apparently if you spit on a sidewalk and they decide they have reason to get you off the street, they can pick you up for terrorism. I mean, that's an extreme example, but that's exactly where it's headed.
Well, yeah. I mean,
and there is no way that we're going to get these people in a court of law at this point, because they control it so well.
They've got it all structured at the choke points of this nation.
Yes, they do. And basically, a lot of people ask me, well, Indira, you've been looking at this for 3 or 4 years, and you have more dots and more legal quality documentation. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah. Okay, Indira, hold that. We're going to come back, and we'll get into that as well, okay?
Okay.
All right, very good. The gallery of rogue players. I mean, if you look at the Bush administration, President Bush has been very busy appointing past associates to key places in government, and Negroponte, one of them, Portergoss from the CIA, another one, and you just go down the line, and you begin to wonder, well, what are we dealing with here? Now, as Indira's research has progressed, she has been able to tie a lot of this stuff back to Iran-Contra, and even a little bit beyond that, because, again, the American people, it just amazed me, because I remember the Iran-Contra hearings in the late 80s. I was fascinated by them. But, the one thing, even me at that time, being uninitiated into, the deep research that I've done and that other people have done, I could still tell that something was drastically wrong. And I find it amazing to me that the American people, even with that incident, that the American people would kind of sit back and take a backseat role in this and not be outraged over the fact that our very own government was distributing and hooking kids on drugs. And, this goes back to things that I have said before. What is the justification? Is national security a justification to commit moral wrongs? Does it mean that just because they say, well, it's for national security, does it mean that they have a blank check, they're above the law? I remind you people that, when you get into that mindset about the idea that some people may be above the law, we're a nation of laws. And when you throw that out the window, just like we're seeing with the illegal alien invasion of this country, we're turning a blind eye to the rule of law, and I think that can only lead to anarchy, or at least a serious breakdown in our society, which is, of course, where these people want it to go. They want to take it to that extreme. And as Indira has said, her research has borne out the idea that we're entering what they call the new age of terrorism, a terrorist economy. And Indira, would you like to pick up on that?
Yes, I would, because the blueprint for an age of terror, for a terrorist economy, has been looked at very jadedly and with extreme fear by serious experts in this business, and it is real. And it basically means that the civilian will have no rights, and you become just a resource and an asset of the government to be utilized in whatever way
Yeah, an economic unit of measurement to them.
Exactly. And what you saw in Katrina is exactly going to be the response for any fallout as the incidents and events in this age of terror are conducted.
Yeah.
In other words, if you think that FEMA, which stands for, people should really remember that it's an emergency management agency, they're not necessarily running in to help you. They're there to manage the assets and the resources that are important to a terror-driven cabal or government set of governments. Now, I believe that we're talking about the fact that this has gone on for so long, and that I must have followed about 300 to 500 threads, significant threads that tie back as you go back in time to the same group of people, and indeed it goes back to the assassination of JFK, and which I don't get into because that's too far back in my research, but I do know that significant links are there. But as we come forward, sometimes they ask me, what are you going to do with all of this information? Who are you going to take it to? And Patrick Fitzgerald today, I think, is a very significant day in our nation's history again, because this was D-Day for the indictments, and this is when we were going to find out whether he was going to be a real player instead of a cover-up artist.
Mm-hmm.
And we find out that he's essentially, even if he handed down the rumored 22 indictments today or not, it wasn't going to make any dent at all in significantly changing this. And sometimes I sit down and wonder, what have I done, other than have absolutely stellar information about this stuff,
mm-hmm.
unimpeachable information about this stuff. Where do I take it to?
Yeah.
I've tried to take it to.
Sure, you've testified before committees.
Well, I've testified in 2 senators' offices. I've testified to a number of Congress people. I've testified to the Open Committee, the 9/11 Open Committee. I have had people on the left and the right and up and down tell me that, well, if you really listen to her, she's not making any accusation. She just states facts. And that, I think, is true. But what I'm going to do now is move forward from that, because, indeed, I've always thought that we could get a clean day in court. I always thought that the American people could rally together and manage to get a clean day in court. If we could get one clean day in court, we would end this. But that is not going to happen. And I have been saying quite openly, either give us our clean day in court or take a very dark black one in the back alleys. Uh-huh. And I don't want to see that happen, because it's unnecessary. That's not what America is about. And surely we can forestall that, but that plays right into the hands of people who are gearing up for this age of terror. That's exactly what these people want.
Yeah. Indira, hold on, we're going to take our break. I just want to let you know, too, this is now official. Libby has just been charged in a 5-count 22-page federal indictment. He's resigned his job at the White House. The charges included 2 felony counts for making false statements to mislead the grand jury. He was also charged with obstruction of justice and 2 perjury counts. 5 indictments, again, were handed down in total. Karl Rove is still free. Okay, and as Indira has said, Patrick Fitzgerald, is probably serving his tactical damage control purpose very well. Anyway, when we come back from break, we're going to take calls. Indira Singh is my guest. We'll continue. I'm Michael Corbin. You're listening to A Closer Look. We continue with this edition of A Closer Look, and again, joining me is Indira Singh, and she is a whistleblower, we've gotten a lot of calls off air, Indira, about your background. People are curious about your background, your credentials, if you will. We're going to get to that in just a second, but I want to open lines at this particular point for people to call in if they have any questions or comments, particularly, the folks that are in the 9/11 Truth Movement. should find your story and your research quite interesting, because you have basically in independent ways, you've refuted every official explanation for 9/11 that there is out there. And as you've said, you've talked to key people in government, but nothing seems to happen. And it's a sad state of affairs. Anyway, let's open lines. The number to call if you're calling from outside the Denver metro calling area is toll free. You can reach us at 877-424-4111, 877-424-4111. That's toll free. If you're calling from inside the Denver metro calling area, you can reach us at 303-423-0188, 303-423-0188. If you could just take a moment before we get back into the meat of this, Indira, give the audience, just kind of bring them up to speed on who you are and how you kind of made the entree into this murky world.
Okay, I'd be happy to. The easiest way for me to answer that is if you Google my name, Indira Singh, excuse me, and 9/11 or WTC, because there are one or two others out there. You'll get a lot of the documentation on me, but very quickly, I have a very high-level information technology and financial Wall Street background. I've been around the block a number of times in different IT capacities, including the fact that I started something called TibetNet to bring technology to the Tibetan government in exile. And at the time of 9/11, I was working as a senior consultant to J.P. Morgan Chase in their risk areas. And I also, at that time, was working as a senior consultant to an organization in Washington, D.C. called the Interoperability Clearinghouse that had ties with the CIA and with DARPA. Mm-hmm. I did not work for DARPA, but I worked with the ICH, and my purpose there was to fund a company that would produce technology that I could use in risk to develop blueprints to stop bad things from happening on large scales.
Mm-hmm. In the banking industry, yeah.
Yeah. My field was, I was merging the fields of risk management and enterprise architecture, and I was pioneering some pretty interesting stuff. I was, really, focused on that. And as a result, I know I know stuff and people on the inside. I am a little appalled that when PTEC fell in my lap, and I just thought that since I worked on Wall Street and so many of us had been personally hurt, lost people, friends, and so on,
right.
Not for a moment did I think that people would not stand by me and back me up. And that in the end really reveals how scared they were and how stupid and naive I was. Mm-hmm. And I admit to that freely. That I didn't understand what was going on. They did, and they backed off. The answer I got over and over again is, I've got a family at home I've got to be worried about. I said, worried about what? We're exposing terrorists. And they said, you don't understand. I said, well, then tell me and speak out about it. And they won't. And I would say, what kind of world are you creating for your children if you do this? Mm-hmm. So I did, in my position at J.P. Morgan Chase, I was involved with credit risk, operational risk, and different risk areas. And I know a lot of the money laundering vehicles, or vehicles that can be used for money laundering and were used to cover up a lot of things. That's a whole other topic that we need to get into, because the people on Enron and the recent WorldCom slap on the wrist, I know where the bodies lie, so to speak, in that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And again, it comes back to the fact that as I saw in the terrorism investigation, it's exactly the same pattern. They'll reveal a little, but once it gets close to these names and these companies and these cutouts and these fronts, they'll shut it down.
You're like chameleons.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we need to stop playing that game. It's conspiracy, catch me if you can, you're this, you're that. We need to stop playing it immediately.
Well, I've always said that probably the true blow to this country's freedom and Constitution was the National Security Act of 1947, which essentially gave license to this rogue band of criminals to basically work above the law, and they do. There's no denying it.
Yeah, they're supra